Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you are very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat, and I'm filming today through my laptop, which accounts for the slightly different angle. I'm doing that because I'm about to be joined on screen by two fabulous guests. They are Nadine Akkerman and Pete Langman, and they are the co-authors of the wonderful book Spycraft, Tricks and Tools of the Dangerous Trade, from Elizabeth I to the Restoration. It's available in hardback, as a Kindle edition, and also on audiobook. And very soon, it's going to be released as a paperback. That's happening on the 23rd of September, 2025. I will leave all of the relevant links in the description box. But without further ado, let's go and talk to them. Hello, thank you so much for joining me. I would love it if you could introduce yourselves and also talk about the book that we're going to be discussing today.
My name is Nadine Akkerman. I'm a professor of early modern literature and culture at Leiden University, the Netherlands.
And I'm Pete Langman, and I'm a historian, I'm an editor, and I'm a bibliographer in the Oxford English Dictionary.
And together we're the authors of Spycraft.
Spycraft is fabulous. It was an absolute joy, and it taught me so many new things. Could I ask, what brought you to this incredible topic of study, and how did you start to approach it?
Well, thank you for the compliments. Very nice to hear that you enjoyed the book. We came to Spycraft because I wrote a book in 2018 called Invisible Agents. People might still remember that, women and espionage in 17th century Britain. And I'd uncovered a network of women involved in a dangerous trade in the 17th century, about 60 or so involved in espionage in some way or other. And we noticed while I was giving talks at festivals or talking to an interviewer such as yourself, people were interested in the women, but they always followed that up with the question, okay, but how did they actually do it? And we realized that wasn't really a book on early modern spycraft at all.
But the amount of times people said, did they really use lemon juice for invisible ink? And we're just like, yes, but. And absolutely. But one of the things we noticed was that everything that had been written on the subject was either had started in World War One, so all the stuff we went earlier was completely ignored, or was just on one topic. So you've got Kahn's Codebreakers, which is a fantastic book on cryptography, but it covers the entire history of cryptography, and as a result spends about 15 or 16 pages on the early modern period, which just isn't enough for us. So we thought what we'd like to do is just zero in on this particular period, which is really quite exciting in terms of espionage in this country, so that we could actually expand into what other things they did.
Yeah, whenever it was discussed, it was kind of glossed over. So nobody really went into the details. What does it actually mean if you forge a seal? Or what does it mean if you mix your invisible ink? How long does it take to break a simple code or a more intricate one? Nobody really thought about these things in detail.
And you always read about these things, and people say, so he broke the code, and then they did this, and then they did that. And there's no idea of exactly what Nadine saying, how difficult it was, what actual the process was, how long it took. So you have no idea. It's a very two-dimensional thing, whereas we wanted to expand it up to 4 dimensions, maybe even 5, but that's possibly pushing it.
Absolutely, because so much of the history of this period is tied up in the secrecy of things and the spying on letters and spying on people. And though that term, spy master, we're obsessed with it. But until this, you're absolutely right, there's not been this really necessary focus, which is why one of the reasons why I'm so glad that you're sitting down with me. Now, when we hear the term spy, I think before I read your book, I think about somebody who's peeking through windows, listening at keyholes. Maybe they've got a maid to tell you what's on someone's bed sheets. We might even think of a more modern example of James Bond. But after all of your research, what do you think when you hear spy now?
Yes, I think about so many things. The one thing you already mentioned was spy master, which is a kind of anachronistic term in the 16th and 17th century, because there was no such thing as one spy master. There were several rival spy chiefs who all sort of competed with each other. So there's no centralized secret service yet. And we follow the development in the book from a kind of amateur, semi-amateur operation to what would become around 1660 a kind of more centralized secret service as we would recognize it today, perhaps. And I think spies didn't really exist as a consequence. Peter Burke, the cultural historian, said that there's an awful lot of spying going on in this period, but there's no such thing as a spy yet. But these people who traded in secret information could come from all strata of society, men and women, and were often more kind of criminally inclined.
Of course, the main difference between then and now is that the car chase is much slower.
Yes, and no helicopters at all.
Helicopters either. That's all you really need to know.
That notion of it not being professionalized, because we hear that phrase, don't we, so much, that knowledge is power. And certainly, I think it was, but at this time, it's also profit. And maybe for some people, a get out of jail or get out of the noose free card, this kind of trade for your own security is so fascinating. There was so much in this book that surprised me, but during your studies, was there anything that truly shocked you about this topic?
I think that certainly the movement from the patronage-based model of spies working for individual spy chiefs to a more professionalized model, and how that is connected with the implements and the techniques that they use, and especially the machineries that they created. Machineries aren't that tough, but the machineries they created to help automate the spying process and the espionage process. That was really quite a surprise to me. I didn't realize how much the technology was interrelated with that move towards professionalization.
And for me, the whole journey was such a joy, because I didn't realize there was so much still to discover in the archives. I thought there are so many books about Sir Francis Walsingham. Probably we've known everything there is to know connected to him. And yet, if you start focusing on the techniques, you uncover people and stories you never have really thought about. So that, I think, was the most surprising part for me.
Yes, and finding out, realizing that in these kind of iconic plots like the Babington plot, where Mary Queen of Scots was colluding with Anthony Babington, who was trying to free her from prison and assassinate Elizabeth I simultaneously, to realize that actually the main actors in that were not Babington and Mary Queen of Scots, but actually her secretaries. To realise that it's the people who no one ever really pays much attention to, who are just kind of sitting in the background writing letters, they're the people actually who are doing the work and who really are directing matters. That was quite a surprise.
Yeah, so by focusing on materiality, what people actually hold in their hands, all these kind of invisible actors come to the fore, and they sort of are really important. So we have sort of, for instance, been focusing on the key players, or what we thought were the key players of the Babington plot, and yet the secretaries were more important because they encoded and decoded letters, and yet they are not really mentioned in any biography of Mary Queen of Scots.
And it's the secretaries who damned her. I mean, it was they specifically who damned her in the end in court. And also that the main actor on the government side, Thomas Philippes, everyone says he broke the code that Mary Queen of Scots and Babington were using. Well, he didn't. I mean, it's absolutely the case that he did not break the code because he didn't need to. He stole it, which completely changes the way you look at things.
It's incredible to me how big these networks are of spies, counter spies, double agents, and the fact that they are in households. You sort of have this perception of spying as shadowy figures working in the darkness, but they are so interconnected. Do you think they all know about each other, or are they almost like distinct cells, if you will?
I think some of them know about each other. There are certainly spy rings active in this period, but it really is the age of suspicion. Everyone was spying on everyone else, and some were kind of very much aware that they had rivals. They wanted to sell their own kind of secret information before anyone else would sell the same information. And as soon as you are trading information for money, there is kind of incentive to make things up as well. So there's also a lot of kind of fabrication of the so-called truth going on. Everyone is telling stories.
And I think one of the other interesting things about the kind of networks that people have is how often you see the same people coming back into the story. You look at Francis Bacon in 1570s went on an embassy to Paris with Sir Améas Paulet, and Thomas Philippes was on the embassy, and they become good friends, and they speak, and they plainly swapped information about ciphers and cryptography. And Améas Paulet ended up being one of Mary Queen of Scots jailers, and then there's a connection to William Wade, who ends up being the lieutenant of the Tower, and all of these people are connected to each other, and they always come back in, and then there's one dips out, and then another one comes back again. So they all do kind of know each other.
Yeah, the kind of sort of spy chiefs really relied on a handful of men in this period. And you see that with the master code breaker, Thomas Philippes. They even need him when he is in debtor's prison. They come to his cell and say, we know that we have imprisoned you, but could you still decode these letters for us? So they clearly don't have an alternative.
And also you've got situations like where William Wade, when Henry Garnet is in the Tower, he knows what to expect from Garnet because he's already imprisoned the Jesuit before, who he's caught using invisible inks. So he knows what to expect. He's seen it before. He's like, I know what you Jesuits do. Gotcha. Oh, you're doing it again. Thank you very much.
Well, it's incredible that these people all know each other. So presumably this lack of trust, you have to work with these people, but you also can't really trust them because you know what they're prepared to do. Whenever I'm at Hampton Court and I'm leading groups around, I point up to the eavesdroppers and I often say, this is a warning to the people who eat their dinner in here, that everything you see is overseen, everything is being listened to, and if you say or do the wrong thing, it's going to get reported. But now I'm wondering if that's also a reminder, a warning to the monarchs in question as well, that exactly the same stuff is happening to them. And I just think it's so interesting. You mentioned previously about a code being stolen. Could you perhaps talk a little bit about how these code breaking things are passed around, what a code would look like, how they're used?
I can give it a try. In this period, most cipher codes would consisted of two parts. One, you had a substitution alphabet. A is 1, 2, 3, B is 4, 5, 6, C, etc. It could really be as simple as that. They're all quite rudimentary in this period. And then the second part of any cipher key is a list of names, a nomenclator, with the King of France being 160, the Queen of France 170, and it's usually groupings of people, so they have a kind of, I'm not sure whether the viewers can see this. Peter's holding up the code here.
Page 76.
And so these would get sent, I'm assuming, ahead of the letters.
Yeah, so that is the tricky part.
You'd either take them with you if you knew, or you would send them via. Invariably, they tended to send them by the same couriers, which is kind of a bit daft. There's this kind of really odd thing where they're very, very careful in certain ways and very, very slapdash in other ways. So they'll do things which are really, really stupid, and as a result, get caught. So what happens with Babington is that after they've first made contact and they've used a relatively simple cipher key with him, they then say, well, okay, from now on we're going to use a much more complex one, which has also been sent to you, which is in the letter, says you're using a new cipher key. Of course, it's gone the same way, so it's intercepted just in the same way that the letter itself is intercepted. So Philippus is just like, okay, yes, it's great, this is much more complicated, it means it'll take much more time for you to write out, but I've got the key here, so it makes my life a lot easier. He could have broken it anyway. He would have broken it anyway, but it would have taken some time. And this again is one of the things that people don't really get about ciphers, is that they don't have to be unbreakable. They really don't. They just have to be good enough to stop you from working out what's happening before it's too late. So that if it says we're going to kill the king on Thursday, if you work it out by Friday, it doesn't really matter because it's already either happened or hasn't. And that's the kind of thing you have to bear in mind. And sometimes you have there were some ciphers that were almost unbreakable, but they were so difficult to use. They would take up so much time that they were just fundamentally useless. And you would get letters of people saying, I'm trying to break the cipher, but you know what? I just haven't got time to do all this.
And people are writing on a duress. So as soon as you're using a cipher code, and just imagine there's candle lights, and you're, as you point out, you feel like you're being watched anyway, so you have to be careful. And you need to understand how to use the cipher key, and mistakes are so easily made. We encourage people who are reading our book and to try it for themselves. There is an appendix which gives a few kind of options to try a cipher code yourself, just to see that even with a simple one, how easy it is to make mistakes. So you need to be quite trained and handy, and of course you're writing it with a quill, which can be in itself difficult enough. So there are all these complications.
Yes, and of course, if you're using lots of little symbols and you're writing quite small, it's very easy to get them wrong. And a lot of them look like each other. So you're in this kind of situation where you're very likely to make mistakes. And you see later on, in the later 17th century, a lot of people abandoned half of the ciphers. So they only encipher the important words, because otherwise it just takes too long.
Yeah, so that substitution alphabet could be A is 1, B is 2, and C is 3, but could also be A is little squiggle, and B it's a circle. So and these symbols resemble each other. So
and C is little squiggle with a dot.
Yeah, so it's really difficult to sort of learn the language, and if you are using 5 different cipher keys because you have 5 different correspondents, you might mix them up.
And there's plenty of evidence of people practicing these things. We've seen quite a few manuscripts where you've got people who are practicing different types of deciphering and getting it wrong. And you can see they're doing it over and over again until they realise that actually if they do it backwards, it works. You know, and so that's always kind of fun to see the process of just like you. And we did the same thing. We're doing this, and this doesn't work this way. But maybe if you flip it around, it does. So you can see them doing exactly the same thing that we're doing. It should be simple.
Yes, because, I mean, even in the best circumstances, when you're typing on your phone or your laptop, somebody who is a native speaker of the language, a native writer of the language, you make spelling errors. I can't imagine then having to transpose that into a series of, for me, meaningless squiggles, maybe with 5 different options, in candlelight, in a panic, trying to work quickly. Of course you're going to make mistakes. And that thing you say about time, that was something I found really interesting in the book, that this has to be able to convey the message to the person that's intended. So they have to be able to decode it. But also for the people who are trying to counter them, they've got to be able to decode it really quickly, potentially forge it and send it on. Because if it takes too long, that's super suspicious. On that note, as you know, I interviewed Dan and Jana about letter locking, and that is discussed in Spycraft. So we talked about how some of these locks become virtually impenetrable, except your book shows me that there's always a workaround. The people that you focus on in the book, how are they dealing with these security measures, with these letters?
Their work is so important. That book about letter locking is really the first kind of study focusing on how to fold your letter. In this period, we might forget that the only way to communicate over a long distance is by letter, by the humble letter. So these kind of what you might think are boring archival pieces become these kind of fascinating objects, the only way for people to communicate. And if you are not using an envelope and you're using your writing sheet and you folded it as a kind of little origami word, if we two were spies, we could say to each other, if you fold your letter in a triangle, I know that it is from you, and you don't have to sign your name, so you don't even have to use a code name. I could just recognize you by the foldings of your letter. So that could be one way that we know as spies how to communicate with each other without giving away our identity to a possible interceptor. But then there were people who were really trained in remodeling these letters, trying to open them without the recipient being any the wiser, and to forge the seals. So it was quite a complicated process, but it could be done.
And avoiding those tears, or if you must tear the paper, presumably forging the whole letter again from scratch.
Yeah, yes, that is so complicated because you need the right paper stock. Paper was handmade, so people would look at the chain lines. Is this from the same piece of paper? But what we also see, and I think that is really kind of fascinating, you would sort of think that as a spy you would choose the most complicated letter locking possibility out there. But that is also advertising to interceptors that you might have something to hide. So these wonderful complicated locks, such as the spiral lock, make a nice little rose on the outside. And if I see that rose on the outside as an interceptor, I think, why has this person gone through so much difficulty folding their letter? Because folding it as such also takes about 20 minutes. So you often also see spies just using a very kind of simple letter locking technique in the hope that it just appears innocuous and that nobody really opens it.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here, yeah.
You have to remember, I think, that counterfeiting a letter is a last resort. It's the last thing you want to do because it takes so long. And we see plenty of letters where people said, well, I've got this letter, but, I don't think it's real. I think it doesn't look right from coming from X. It's not quite the right handwriting. So they were very suspicious. They were interrogating everything. And of course, what was happening to letters was that they were being interrogated. You would catch the letters, you would interrogate them, and then you'd let them free. And just like an opposing spy, and you interrogate them, get whatever information, let them free. You wanted them to not tell people they're meeting at the end that they've been compromised. And that's where the skill was.
Yeah.
It's almost like the letters themselves as objects almost become anthropomorphized, that they are players in this game of spycraft with personality and identity. They can be secretive people. They can run around and hide things. I think that's really fascinating, the power that these objects have. And in a world where we're losing the desire to write letters and we're sending it all electronically, we're losing that kind of beauty, and also perhaps the difficulty of some of these things, and sometimes the danger, because all of this stuff we're talking about is life and death. It's life and death of people being spied on, but it's also presumably life and death for the spies, because if you're caught...
Yeah, you would be executed as a spy in this period, of course. So it's really life and death. But also if you would be caught because you have forged the letter, or if you have forged the signature of the king, for instance, that's treason. So again, it wouldn't end up well with you.
Yeah, it brings a whole new meaning to the word letter rack, doesn't it?
It's terribly dangerous. And even just forging documents, you could literally be branded as a traitor. Your ears could be cut off, your nose could be slit, you would be branded for life. Unless you would, for instance, be recruited as a spy, unless your skills would be recognized. And that the regime thought, actually, these are skills that we can actually use.
Because, of course, a lot of the techniques that we talk about cross over from the espionage sphere into the criminal sphere and back. Because most of what you do as a spy is illegal and immoral and certainly illicit. So all of these techniques are the same thing. There's no difference between forging a passport that gets you across the border than there is forging a receipt that you take to the privy purse and wangle 5 shillings out of the treasury. It's the same thing.
That's very much the way of life in this period. Are you a pirate or are you a privateer? Are you doing casting a horoscope for the benefit of the Queen, or are you practicing the occult and need to be punished accordingly? There's such a fine line in the skills and disciplines you have that can mean that you are a benefit and an asset, but you put one toe wrong, you don't give the right result, and all of a sudden, it's a very different story.
or you don't have the right master and he said the wrong thing that week, as happened with Essex, because of course Essex had a huge bundle of spies working for him, but as soon as he lost his position in various parts of his anatomy, his spy network was basically destroyed. And one of the spies that we looked at failed to get a job as with Essex, which was probably the best thing that ever happened to him.
Presumably, the spies who are working for somebody like Essex, they want the preferment of somebody who's so high up at court. But there's got to be a part of it that they are doing it for Queen and country. And then ultimately, all of that goes away because their boss makes some very silly choices and falls out with the wrong people. And then their livelihoods become totally jeopardised.
Henry Cuff, one of those people, for example.
I wanted to ask you about favourite moments, favourite people, favourite pieces of equipment. So perhaps you could... Is he one of your favourites?
No, I was just thinking about men who were in the wrong spy division at the wrong time. He was one of Essex's intelligences and was executed just because of his job.
One of my favourite people is Arthur Gregory. I think he's also the hero of the book. He's our early modern Q. He is the man who invents little machineries, little instruments. He's an engineer, he works in fortifications, he works on explosives. He is famous even in his own lifetime because Camden already mentions him as a letter locker, one who can sort of open and refold letters and forge seals. Yeah, a letter unlocker. And he is there constantly. He is with Mary Queen of Scots. But he later also turns up at the gunpowder plots. He manages to find a method to copy cipher codes quickly and to forge invisible inks. So he's early modern Q. He's a fascinating individual.
But also he's constantly writing letters to Walsingham, to Robert Cecil, to William Cecil, and to Essex, trying to get patronage because he needs somebody to pay for him and protect him. Because of the way the patronage worked, he couldn't give away his secrets. So he would say things very obliquely about what he could do so that they'd have to hire him rather than somebody else going, oh yeah, I can do that, and doing the same thing. So he's constantly trying to get patronage. So when he comes back with the gunpowder plot, he's actually already retired. He's gone back to Lyme Regis to retire as a customs officer or whatever it is, comes back and finally has his moment in the sun, which he gets a nice fat pension for, which I think he thinks he should have had a lot earlier.
He's one of those people who points out it would have been so much easier if you only give me my own office. So these are kind of self-employed individuals who are working from home. Is that it would be so much easier if I could just have an office and a bit of space without having to care for my 8 children running around me.
And if it was in the tower, so I could have direct access to everything. So it's absolutely what he needs and what actually ends up happening, not necessarily to him, but in general. So he's very, very well aware that he needs continuous access to all these letters, all this information, so that he can do what he needs to do. And he's constantly experimenting as well, and he makes himself quite ill by trying to work out how to make a certain sealing metal to forge seals. And what I think he actually has kind of made was the equivalent to the dental amalgam we used to use to fill in our teeth. Which is kind of got a lot of mercury in, not very good for you. But it starts off as a kind of squidgy paste and then turns very hard and metallic. That's what he made. But because he was moulding it in his hands, he makes himself quite ill. And he writes these letters to Walsingham and then later Cecil saying, well, everything was going well, and then my eye seems to be trying to burst out of my skull. And then he says, I was going to come over and show you how to do this, but I think you should probably lay off handling this for a while because I've just been doing it for 2 days and my hands haven't stopped shaking because he's poisoning himself.
And what he was trying to find is how to forge a seal quickly. So it is, if you break your seal and you can't really repair it again with glue, with fish glue, then you have to sort of make a seal new. Yeah, that is kind of, this one you could probably glue together because this has come loose quite neatly. You can just put a little bit of glue between and you can perhaps glue that together. But you really want, if you're constantly intercepting letters of the same ambassador, for instance, you want to remake that seal so that you can just quickly replace it with a new one. And he was experimenting not with kind of casting with plaster, what they also did, which just took time. It took a couple of hours to dry. He wanted something that could dry immediately, so that the people who were writing letters didn't get they weren't suspicious of their letters taking too long.
Again, it's time. It comes back down to time.
Danger's just lurking around every corner. If it's not the people spying on you, if it's not you spying on them, if it's not you getting caught by a rogue monarch or somebody else, it's the materials you're using. Everything is trying to kill you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Is there a moment in your history of spying that you can pinpoint as being like the game changes here, or do you think it's a continuum developing up to present day?
I think when the game changes is really around the Civil War. Perhaps even a bit later during the interregnum, when you have Cromwell's spy chiefs, who then it becomes a kind of more centralized service, and that's when they decide we're not going to rely on our one expert. We not only want our one master code breaker who we need to visit when he is imprisoned, when he is in debtor's prison, but we actually want a team of people who cooperate with each other, and they all going to be in the same office, and they could learn from each other. That's when the kind of black chambers start popping up in England, a kind of intelligence units where they quite systematically open letters. So there's your letter locker who knows how to open a letter. Then the person sitting next to him is skilled in copying that letter quickly. Then you have your code breaker, you perhaps have a translator, you have someone who forges seals. So it becomes a little kind of production line. And nobody knows the secrets anymore, or nobody sort of protects their own secrets.
The secrets that are more spread around, so there are more people who are able to do the same thing. So effectively you have a civil service, haven't we? But I think if there is one point to focus on, it's the creation of the post office by Cromwell, because he explicitly creates the general post office so that he can intercept mail. He says, what we need all the letters going through the same place so that we can intercept them all. And he says that in his articles of this is why I'm making the general post office, it's so that we can intercept everything. And what happens is that the guys who are in this black chamber, which is the post office during the interregnum, obviously parliamentarians, right? So you've got Samuel Morland and Isaac Dorslaus is number two. When the regime changes, now normally when a regime changes, you've got an Essex situation. Anybody who's on the losing side kind of either gets at the very least fired, or the very most kind of oft. Dorslaus and Morland just stay. So they serve Parliament, and then they serve the king. It makes no difference to them because they're just doing intelligence work. So it suddenly has become bureaucracy.
Yeah, they become civil servants. And I think it's so funny that in 1655, Oliver Cromwell founds the General Post Office not for people in England to just receive letters, but for him to spy on their mail. And I think that's just brilliant.
That's why a first-class letter takes so long to get to anyone these days, because they're having to open them all and read them.
We don't announce that's the history of the post office. So I think it's very important that we've flagged it up here. I am going to start wrapping up because I've taken up far too much of your time. I've had an absolutely wonderful discussion. Before I let you go, I am just going to throw a little curveball question that I like to throw at people, but I don't like to tell them about it beforehand. The curveball question is, why does history matter?
Oh.
Well, you've already answered the question, because if you don't know that the post office was set up to intercept your letters, you're missing something.
The past defines who we are today, and it matters because we can constantly look at each other and ourselves in a new way by looking at history in different ways and rewriting history, and therefore rewriting ourselves.
And it's really fun.
It is really fun. It is really fun. So, where people can purchase your book, as both a hard copy, but also as an audiobook in all of the places, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
It's also
And is it available internationally as well?
Yep.
Yeah.
September, the paperback comes out.
Yes, in September 2025, the paperbacks comes out. If you can still get your hands on a hard copy, do so, because that has a little surprise for you. Because if you sort of put it on a reading light, then in the middle of the evening it will start glowing in the dark.
And if you're interested in ciphers, this is a cipher wheel that we made. So you could, just for using for deciphering and reciphering and enciphering, and there are lots of additional wheels that you can do. Now, if you go to the Yale website and look at Spycraft on the Yale website, there's a panel, drop-down panel, where you can download some blanks and make your own
cipher wheel.
That sounds like a really super fun activity. The summer holidays are approaching. I think if you've got small humans in your life, or indeed you've got some time off over the summer, start your own cipher wheel. I think that sounds like a really fun idea. It's been incredible. I will leave all of those resources linked, obviously linked to where you can get the book, but also linked to the Yale website as well. Thank you both so much for sitting down with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
But what do you think of the topic we have discussed today, of Spycraft? Have you picked up this book already and read it? If so, what do you think? Are you planning to get it? If you are, please do head back here once you've read it and let us know your thoughts in the comments, because as always, I am looking forward to reading your conversations in the comment section underneath this video. I'd also love it if you pop an emoji or a social glyph in the comments too, because that will help to boost the engagement, get this video shared out more, and therefore help us to grow our community. I'm thinking it makes sense to do something that's spy or spying related. If you could also explain why you've picked the emoji that you have, that should help too, because that will make the algorithm goblins happy, apparently. You can also find me elsewhere on social media. I will leave links to all the places you can find me on the internet in my description box. Please do follow me over on some or all of those so we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please share it with your friends. If you like my channel, let some pals know about it. You can tip this video in particular by hitting the thumbs up. And please do subscribe to the channel. If you think you are subscribed, have a check now, just to make sure you're not mysteriously unsubscribed against your will. While you are there, checking, subscribing, maybe resubscribing, please hit the bell icon beside the subscribe button and then select all in the drop-down that will appear. And that way, YouTube allege, they will tell you when I've next uploaded, but also when I'll next be going live, which at the moment I'm doing once a month to talk about the history news. We sit down together and we look through the news items that I have been sent by you lovely lot. It takes about 2.5 hours currently, and I think that's only going to go up. It's sometimes silly, sometimes pretty serious. Either way, it seems like everyone's having a good time. I know I am, and you aren't going to want to miss it. Of course, we have now got our failsafe. If you head to my website, which I will link, it's www.katrinamarchant.com. Head over to the contact page and then put your email address in the box you will see there and click sign up. That will add you to my list and will let me send you out an email once a week to let you know what I've been up to, but also to send you useful links to my content for the coming days. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.